Hello, my name is Douglas, and in this short lecture I'm going to discuss Catullus 5, arguably one of the Roman poet's greatest works, certainly one of his most famous ones. To begin with, we'll look at Catullus and his relationship with a woman he calls Lesbia, which I hope will then allow us to fully understand the meaning of the poem, which I'll walk you through slowly. Finally, we'll look at the history of the poem after Catullus, from the varied interpretations of the word conturbarbimus to Sir Walter Raleigh's beautiful translation of the Carpe Diem motif in lines 4 to 6. Overall, I hope that this video gives you some idea of how this poem is, in my opinion, an absolute masterpiece. But first, Catullus's background. He was born in Verona in around 84 BC to a wealthy family. 17 years later he moved to Rome and joined the vanguard of poets there. In 57 BC he moved to a place called Bithynia in the north of modern-day Turkey, where he worked as an aide to the governor. After this adventure in the east, he returned to Rome, where he died poor and lonely at the age of 30. His relationship with a woman whom he refers to as Lesbia, although this is most certainly a pseudonym, perhaps of a woman called Claudia, is the most interesting thing known about him. The couple most likely met in Rome, and it is to this Lesbia that 25 of the 115-odd surviving poems by Catullus are addressed. They chronicle Lesbia and Catullus's relationship through excitement and through turbulence. Catullus was by no means Lesbia's only lover. So now we move on to the poem itself. Catullus doesn't hold back at all with his first line. "Let us live, my Lesbia, and let us love." This identifies the two key themes of the poem, life and love, which we see woven throughout. Catullus suggests with this first line that life and love are the two most important things, and that thus they are firmly connected. You cannot love without life, and you cannot live without love. There's also a darker side to the poem. It's not purely blind affection, and we begin to see this in line 2, where Catullus describes the mysterious characters, notably unnamed, who oppose his relationship. He describes the rumours circulating about the romance, although he does then, in line 3, describe his and Lesbia's triumph over these stern old men, by reducing the value of the rumours to that of just 1 penny. In his writing, Catullus had to compromise between innovation and tradition, and here the dilemma between the new and the old plays out in his actual life. Catullus chooses the new, his relationship with Lesbia, and ignores tradition represented by those stern old men. In line 4, the sun sets and then rises. This is an inversion of how we normally think about the sun. Typically it rises at the beginning of the day and then sets later, in the evening. But here, by inverting it, Catullus makes us think more about night than day. And as we can clearly see from line 6, when Catullus describes our night as eternal, it symbolises death. Although Catullus opens his poem with the theme of life, he chooses to focus on the darker opposite, on death. Here, Catullus and Lesbia cannot triumph, unlike with the rumours. The finality of death means that their relationship must at some point end. In the first 3 lines, the rumours against their relationship are reduced to 1 penny. But here, it is the relationship itself that is reduced to one long sleep. Catullus says soles, or suns, in the plural, to add to his contrast between the perpetuality of the heavens and our mortality. There are many suns, but just one life. There's also a contrast of scale between the cosmic suns and our insignificant bodies. The multiplicity of the next section creates a much more energetic scene than the singleness of the previous ones. It is explicitly mathematical. Catullus appears to count the kisses he has with Lesbia in hundreds and thousands before confusing the count, such that no one would know the number of kisses. The incessant onslaught of numbers here is playful. It's confusing, it's almost ridiculous. But whilst Catullus's poetry might appear like a mindless deluge of love, in fact there is much order and mathematical structure behind it. And this section, with its conspicuous repetition, clearly demonstrates that. Initially we might think that the numbers arise randomly, but in fact they come in a systematic pattern, 1,000 and then 100 on each line. Catullus doesn't want us to add his kisses up, although it may seem that he does. The intense barrage of figures is to show the futility of trying. He wants to destroy rationality and calculation, as this is synonymous with the stern old men that oppose his relationship. But again, his dilemma between the old and the new, between tradition and innovation, plays out. Here, in fact, he chooses to a certain extent tradition. He himself counts the kisses, not the stern old men, whom naturally we might think are more likely to do so. Why does he count the kisses? Perhaps he wants to warn himself about just how many kisses he is having, and thus the unorthodox nature of his actions. Catullus' energy counting his kisses with Lesbia does, however, die away, as he begins to worry about what would happen if the people whose rumours he had just dismissed at a penny's fee learnt precisely how many kisses the couple had had. That's why he confuses the count. The final two lines conclude the theme of love, but through its darker side. Throughout the whole poem, what we have seen is a debate between passion and rationality, emotion and reason, ecstasy and calculation. Catullus wants to live and love, and he gives Lesbia hundreds and thousands of kisses. But then he also precisely evaluates the rumours of the stern old men, counts the precise number of kisses he has with Lesbia, before rationally deciding that preserving such a count would be dangerous. Catullus is someone caught in the crossfire between the forces of tradition and radicalism, and I think that's something that's quite relatable for many people today. Catullus' poem is not only interesting in and of itself, its history after the Romans is also intriguing. Catullus' poems were rediscovered in around 1300 on a single manuscript, and only one copy of this manuscript and two copies of a different copy survive. Copying manuscripts inherently induces errors, and academics have continually been trying to rectify these problems. However, a different aspect of academic study that I'm going to explore is about the word conturbarbimus, meaning we will confuse the count. In 1941, an American scholar, Harry L. Levi, posed that Catullus was keeping count of the kisses he had with Lesbia on an abacus, by moving the calculi, the little beads, into the hundreds and thousands columns, before confusing the count by violently shaking the abacus, causing the calculi to scatter and for the number of kisses to be forgotten. He argued that this would explain Catullus' choice of number. There were always powers of 10, and the powers of 10 are the integer columns of an abacus, and also that using an abacus would not have been so unusual for such a trivial sum. Another idea, proposed by a man called Roger Pack in 1956, is that Catullus was counting on his fingers. Although this arguably fits less well with the Latin, Pack argues that Catullus would not have been familiar with an abacus, which were normally used by tradesmen, but that he would have certainly been familiar with finger counting, as he was an educated Roman. I should note that the Romans could count much higher than simply 10 using their fingers. They could count into the hundreds and thousands. Pack also suggests that Catullus uses his hands elsewhere in the poem. For example, at the word conturbarbimus, he wiggles his fingers such that the counting is lost. After these two initial ideas by Levi and Pack, scholars have continually debated which, if either, they find more convincing, and studied the other mathematical elements of the poem, including its structure. I personally find these changing interpretations fascinating, because it shows that although this poem has existed for literally thousands of years, people in the modern era can still discover new dimensions to it. Another way in which the poem has had a life after Catullus is in translation. Countless times has it been translated into our meagre language, English, often in innovative ways. Sir Walter Raleigh, the famous English statesman during the Elizabethan era, wrote a beautiful translation of lines 4 to 6 of Catullus' poem, which is that carpe diem motif. The quatrain he wrote goes as follows. The sun may set and rise, but we, contrariwise, sleep after our short light, one everlasting night. I love this translation primarily for its sound. The large number of monosyllabic words contrast with the mere 3 polysyllabic words which jump out at us. Contrariwise should initially be confusing. We do set and rise each night when we go to sleep. So why is Raleigh saying that we don't? Only in the last section, which Raleigh opens with the word after, which echoes around my head as I say it, can we understand that he's referring to our mortality. Everlasting, the final of these polysyllabic words, mimetically conveys the eternal length of the afterlife by literally slowing the poem down. Everlasting. In Catullus' original, he says, occidet brevis lux. The number of syllables in each word decreases as we come to the end of the line. The sound ends as the life ends. And lux, which unusually for a monosyllabic word has been placed at the end of a line, mimetically conveys the brevity of life, oppositely to Raleigh's everlasting. I think that Raleigh must have understood, to some extent, that Catullus used syllables here to convey meaning, and so tried to do the same thing in his own translation. I hope you found this lecture insightful. I think that the key takeaway from it should be that Catullus wrote his love letter not as a swirling tornado of emotion, but as an ordered and precise masterpiece. I would recommend, if you want to learn more about Catullus and his poetry, reading lots of his poems. Numbers 3, 51, 85 and 86 are my personal favourites.